My name is Lila, and if you had told me a year ago that I would be standing on the edge of my career, poised between triumph and humiliation, I would have laughed. I've always been the kind of person who finds solace in the quiet corners of a bustling hospital, the friendly chatter of colleagues, and the rhythmic beeping of machines. As a surgical nurse, I have spent countless nights in the operating room, my heart racing with the pulse of the patient's life hanging in the balance. I've always prided myself on my resilience and my ability to help others through their most vulnerable moments. Yet, on that fateful day, I stood before my coworkers, feeling the heat of shame wash over me, a wave of embarrassment that threatened to drown me in front of the very people I respected. It all started during a routine staff meeting. You know those meetings, where the air is thick with a mix of anticipation and dread, as everyone wonders what new policies will be rolled out or which unfortunate soul will be called out for a mistake. I was sitting there, half listening to our department head, Dr. Hargrove, drone on about efficiency metrics and patient satisfaction scores. I had seen him at his best and worst. He could be charming one moment and utterly condescending the next. That day, he was in a mood. As he scanned the room, his gaze landed on me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Lila," he said, with a smirk that twisted my stomach into knots. "You've been with us long enough to know that teamwork is crucial. Tell me, how do you think we can improve our communication in the OR?" The room went silent, and I could feel the eyes of my colleagues boring into me, waiting for a profound revelation. My mind raced. I had a million thoughts, but the pressure was palpable. It was a simple question, really, but in that moment, it felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. I stammered out a half-hearted answer, something about open dialogue and timely feedback, but I could see the flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "That's it? I expected more from you, Lila. You're a nurse, not just a warm body in scrubs." Laughter erupted around the room, and my cheeks burned with humiliation. It was one thing to be criticized, but to be belittled like that in front of my peers? It cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know below. The laughter faded, and I forced myself to focus on the meeting, but my mind was elsewhere. How could Dr. Hargrove be so insensitive? Didn't he realize I had worked late nights and early mornings, dedicating myself to this job? As the meeting dragged on, I felt the sting of his words echo in my mind. I was more than just a nurse. I was a vital part of this team. And yet, I felt invisible. After the meeting, as I walked back to the nurse's station, I couldn't shake off the feeling of embarrassment. I wanted to confront him, to tell him how his words affected me, but I knew better. He was my superior, and any confrontation would only lead to more trouble. Instead, I buried my feelings and focused on my patients. The days rolled on, and I tried to put the incident behind me. But fate has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. Just a week later, I found myself in the OR with Dr. Hargrove again, this time under very different circumstances. We were working on a complex surgery, one that required absolute precision and teamwork. As the lead nurse, I was in charge of coordinating everything, from the instruments to the medication. As the surgery progressed, I noticed Dr. Hargrove becoming increasingly agitated. He was making small mistakes, misplacing instruments and mixing up dosages. I felt the tension rise in the room. He was losing his focus, and I knew that could be catastrophic. I stepped in, gently reminding him of the next steps and offering support, but he snapped at me, frustrated with the pressure of the situation. "Lila, just do your job and let me handle this," he growled, and I felt that same familiar pang of humiliation rise again. But I couldn't just stand there and watch him falter. I took a deep breath and called out to him, asking him to step back for a moment. It was a risk, but I needed to ensure the patient's safety. To my surprise, he hesitated, his brow furrowing in confusion. "You think you can do better?" He shot back, but I knew I had to keep my composure. In that moment, I realized that my role was not just to support him, but to protect our patient. I took charge, directing the other nurses, managing the instruments, and keeping a close eye on the monitors. Slowly but surely, we turned the tide, and the surgery began to stabilize. Dr. Hargrove eventually fell silent, his demeanor shifting as he finally recognized my efforts. The surgery concluded, and the patient was stabilized, but the emotional roller coaster was far from over. As I stepped out of the OR, I was met with a whirlwind of emotions: relief, pride, and yes, that nagging sense of humiliation from the meeting. Little did I know, the following days would unravel a shocking truth that would turn everything I thought I knew about Dr. Hargrove upside down. As I prepared myself to face whatever came next, I couldn't help but wonder about the nature of respect and recognition in the workplace. Would I ever truly be valued for my contributions? And what would it take for someone like Dr. Hargrove to see me as more than just a nurse? I was about to find out. The days following that intense surgery were a blur, filled with routine tasks and the persistent echo of Dr. Hargrove's demeaning words still ringing in my ears. Each time I passed him in the hall, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It was as if he were a shadow hanging over me, reminding me of my place in his eyes. The proud, competent nurse I knew I was felt reduced to a ghost of my professional self. I threw myself into my work, focusing on patients and my fellow staff, trying to drown out the internal struggle that was brewing within me. I had always believed that actions spoke louder than words. In the operating room, I had done everything I could to save that patient, and it had worked. I had earned my stripes that day, but it seemed that those accolades were still locked away in the vault of Dr. Hargrove's perception. I wondered how many others faced this kind of systemic undervaluation. Was I alone? Or were there other voices like mine silenced beneath the weight of ego and entitlement? On a particularly busy afternoon, as I was prepping a patient for a minor procedure, I overheard a couple of nurses discussing Dr. Hargrove's latest case. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders to make sure he wasn't within earshot. It intrigued me enough to stop and listen. Apparently, he had been involved in a complicated surgery that had gone south, and rumors were flying about his decision-making. They mentioned complications that could have been avoided, and how he had been relying heavily on his team to pull him through. It was a strange feeling, hearing those whispers. On one hand, I didn't want to revel in his misfortune. I didn't wish ill upon anyone, least of all a colleague. But on the other hand, there was a flicker of validation in knowing that others were starting to see through the facade of infallibility he had built around himself. I couldn't help but think about how twisted it was that I found myself hoping for him to falter just a little so he could finally appreciate what we nurses bring to the table. As the days wore on, I began to notice a shift in the office dynamics. There was a sense of camaraderie growing amongst the staff that hadn't been there before. I started to hear more laughter in the break room, and saw nurses teaming up for patient care, in ways that felt more collaborative than competitive. It felt like we were becoming a family, united against a common adversary, albeit one who was oblivious to the growing tide. One day, as I was grabbing a quick coffee, I found myself next to Sarah, one of the newer nurses. She was sweet and eager, fresh out of nursing school and full of idealism. I had been mentoring her a bit, guiding her through the intricacies of our unit. As we stood in line, she turned to me, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is it just me? Or does Dr. Hargrove seem different lately?" she asked quietly, glancing toward the door as if she expected him to walk in any minute. I took a sip of my coffee, contemplating how to respond. "Different how?" She shrugged, her shoulders lifting in a way that conveyed both uncertainty and hope. "I don't know. He seems off, like he's not as confident as he usually is." I nodded, not wanting to get caught up in gossip, but unable to ignore the truth that lingered beneath her words. "Yeah, I've noticed that too. It's been a tough few weeks for him, but I think it's important for us to focus on our patients and support each other, regardless of what's happening with him." Sarah smiled appreciatively, and we finished our coffee in a comfortable silence. I was grateful for our little chat. It reminded me that change often begins in the small moments we share with each other. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself entrenched in this new rhythm. I had my head down, focusing on patient care and helping my colleagues wherever I could. It was rewarding work, but that nagging feeling of disrespect from Dr. Hargrove still lingered. Then, one evening, as I was leaving for the day, I bumped into Dr. Hargrove as he was stepping out of his office. He looked tired, his eyes weary, and his shoulders slumped. I had half a mind to brush past him, to not even acknowledge his presence, but something held me back. Maybe it was the human instinct to recognize when someone is struggling. Or perhaps it was the lingering hope that the man I had seen in the OR, the one who had ultimately been humbled, was still in there somewhere. "Dr. Hargrove," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He paused, his gaze meeting mine. For a moment, I could see the tension in his face soften. "Nurse Collins," he replied, sounding almost surprised that I had initiated the conversation. "Just wanted to say that last surgery, it was tough, but you handled it well," I said, surprising even myself with my own honesty. His expression shifted, caught between gratitude and disbelief. "Thanks," he said slowly, his voice low. "I appreciate that." There was a moment of silence, a fragile space between us where the air felt thick with unspoken words. I could sense that he was grappling with something deeper, a vulnerability that had been all but hidden beneath his bravado. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps there was a chance for change. Maybe if I could see him as more than just a tyrant, he could see me as more than just a nurse. Maybe we could finally meet somewhere in the middle, where respect and recognition could flourish. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something significant. The workplace dynamics were shifting, and with it, the potential for understanding, healing, and growth. I couldn't wait to see where this journey would lead us all. The next few days felt different. The usual chaos of the hospital was still there. The beeping machines, the hurried footsteps, the endless rounds of paperwork. But somehow, it was tinted with a sense of possibility. I found myself looking forward to my shifts, not just because of the patients I cared for, but because of the subtle shift in my relationship with Dr. Hayes. Every time I passed him in the halls, there was a new layer of acknowledgement. It was as if we had both agreed, silently, to leave some of our past animosities behind. I could see him in the break room, pouring himself a cup of coffee, and he would look up, catch my eye, and nod. A nod that felt like a bridge was being built between us, one small gesture at a time. One afternoon, I was restocking supplies in the surgical unit when I overheard a couple of the surgical assistants chatting. They were gossiping about Dr. Hayes' recent surgery, the one I had complimented him on. "I heard he almost lost the patient," one of them said, her voice laced with intrigue. "They say Nurse Collins was the one who saved him when things got dicey." I felt a strange mix of pride and discomfort at being the subject of their conversation. Yes, I had acted quickly, but the real hero was the entire surgical team. I didn't want to be singled out. I didn't want to be a topic of gossip, especially not in the context of Dr. Hayes' skills as a surgeon. But that was the nature of the beast in a hospital. We were all interconnected, our reputations woven together like a complex tapestry. I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if Dr. Hayes learned that I was the one who had stepped in when he faltered. Would it change how he viewed me? Would he see me as an ally, or just another threat? The very next day, I had a chance to find out. I was prepping for a major surgery, the kind that required every ounce of focus and precision. The team was buzzing with energy, and I could feel the adrenaline in the air. As I set up the instruments, I noticed Dr. Hayes pacing back and forth, glancing at the clock, clearly anxious. "Hey, you good?" I asked, surprising myself with my casual tone. I was still getting used to this newfound dynamic where I felt I could speak to him without fear of reprimand. He looked at me, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, just, you know how it is. These surgeries can be unpredictable. Just remember we've got your back," I said, and I meant it. He nodded, visibly relaxing at my words. "Thanks, Nurse Collins. I appreciate it." We headed into the operating room, and as the procedure began, I could feel the weight of the moment. The patient was a young mother, and we all knew what was at stake. As the operation progressed, things went smoothly for the first half. The rhythm of the surgery felt almost choreographed, but then, as is often the case in medicine, things took a turn. The patient started to bleed more than expected. I could see the tension in Dr. Hayes' jaw as he tried to maintain control of the situation. In that moment, I could sense a shift in the atmosphere, the kind that sends a ripple of fear through the entire team. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "Dr. Hayes, do you want me to grab the clamps?" He hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough. That brief pause felt like an eternity, and I could see the fear in his eyes. "Yes, please," he finally said, and I dashed to the sterile table, grabbing the necessary tools and handing them to him without missing a beat. The surgery continued, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was a dance, a delicate balance of chaos and precision. The tension in the room was palpable, but I stayed focused, reminding myself of the importance of every action I took. When we finally finished, the relief was overwhelming. I remember glancing at Dr. Hayes, who seemed to exhale a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good job, team," he said, but his eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment, something unspoken passed between us. It was a silent acknowledgement of the storm we had just weathered together. After the surgery, as we were cleaning up, Dr. Hayes approached me, looking more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. "Hey, I wanted to thank you for what you did in there. I don't think the outcome would have been the same without your quick thinking." I felt my heart race. Here was a man who had once belittled me, and now he was standing in front of me, recognizing my contributions. "We're a team, Dr. Hayes. It's what we do," I replied, trying to keep my tone light, even as my emotions swirled within me. He seemed to weigh my words, his expression thoughtful. "No, seriously, I appreciate it. I'm not always the easiest person to work with, and I know that. But I want to change that. I really do." His sincerity caught me off guard. I had expected him to brush it off, to fall back into his usual bravado. But here he was, showing a side of himself that felt raw and real. I realized then that we were both navigating this new territory together, both trying to reconcile our pasts while moving forward. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself reflecting on our evolving relationship. What I had once perceived as insurmountable walls were beginning to crumble, revealing the potential for understanding and respect. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth about my role in that surgery loomed over us like a shadow. Would he ever find out? And if he did, what would it mean for us, for the work we were doing together? I knew that the truth could either solidify our bond or tear it apart, and the uncertainty of that thought left me restless as I prepared for another day at the hospital. I woke up one morning, the sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. It was a reminder that life continued, even when I felt stuck in a loop of anxiety and uncertainty about the future. With each passing day, the pressure of keeping my secret weighed heavily on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living a lie, even if my intentions were pure. I had saved his life, but the truth was a double-edged sword, and I was terrified of the cut it could make. As I arrived at the hospital, the familiar scent of antiseptic filled my senses. The hustle and bustle of the morning shift was already in full swing. Nurses rushed past, stethoscopes dangling around their necks, while the sound of medical equipment punctuated the air. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, reminding myself why I had chosen this path in the first place. I wanted to help people, to be a part of something bigger than myself. Walking through the corridors, I spotted Kevin. He was deep in conversation with Dr. Lewis, both of them leaning over a set of charts. I felt a pang of nervousness, my heart racing as I approached them. Kevin caught sight of me, and a smile broke across his face. "Hey, there's the miracle worker," he said, lightheartedly. I could feel my cheeks flush. The irony of his words stung more than I expected. "Just doing my job," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. Dr. Lewis looked at me with a knowing expression, as if he sensed the tension hanging between Kevin and me. He made a quick excuse to step away, leaving us alone. "So, what's on the agenda today?" Kevin asked, shifting the topic as he always did when he wanted to avoid deeper conversations. I appreciated the effort, but the truth was still lurking, a specter in our dynamic. "Just the usual rounds, I think," I answered, trying to shake off the heaviness in my chest. I could feel the unspoken words between us, thickening the air. As we walked through the hospital together, I noticed that our interactions felt different. There was a certain ease in the way we moved, a rhythm that had developed through shared experiences. We exchanged stories about patients and laughed over silly mishaps. For a moment, it felt almost normal, as if the past didn't hang over us like a dark cloud. But the more we laughed, the more I felt the guilt creeping back in. I decided to immerse myself in my work, hoping that focusing on patients would distract me from the emotional turmoil. As I entered the pediatric ward, a young girl named Mia caught my attention. She was sitting on her bed, her small hands gripping a worn-out teddy bear. Her eyes lit up when I approached, and I couldn't help but smile. "Hi there, Mia. How are we feeling today?" I asked, kneeling down to her level. "Better. I think the medicine is working," she replied, her voice bright and hopeful. It was moments like this that reminded me why I loved my job. I spent time chatting with her, making her laugh, and before I knew it, I had lost track of time. Eventually, I excused myself to check on other patients. As I walked down the hallway, my mind wandered back to Kevin. I couldn't deny that I felt a connection with him that was growing stronger. But every time I thought about being honest, a wave of fear washed over me. What would happen if he found out? Would he resent me? Would it change everything? Later that afternoon, I found myself back in the break room, pouring a cup of coffee. Kevin joined me, his eyes tired but warm. "Long day?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "Just the usual," I replied, trying to appear nonchalant. "How about you?" he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know, it's not just the hours that get to me sometimes. It's the emotional toll." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The weight of our profession often felt unbearable, especially when we had to face the harsh realities of life and death. "It can be tough," I said softly, "but we do it because we care." He looked at me, his gaze piercing as if he was trying to read my thoughts. "You know, I really appreciate you. I don't think I've said that enough." My heart raced at his words, and I found myself smiling. "Thank you. That means a lot." We shared a moment of silence, and for a fleeting second I thought about confessing everything. But then doubt crept in. What if I lost this newfound connection? What if I lost him? Just as I was about to voice my thoughts, the break room door swung open, interrupting the moment. A fellow nurse popped in, rattling off a list of urgent tasks. Kevin and I snapped back to reality, our conversation abruptly cut short. As the day came to an end, I found myself sitting in my car, staring out at the sunset. The vibrant colors painted the sky, but they couldn't mask the turmoil inside me. I had to make a decision. I could either continue to hide my truth or find a way to confront it. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life. The road home felt long and winding, each turn echoing the uncertainty in my heart. As I drove, I couldn't help but wonder what my next steps should be. Was it time to share my secret, or was it better to keep it buried? I knew one thing for sure. My feelings for Kevin were growing stronger, and the truth would eventually catch up with me. I just hoped I was ready when it did. As I pulled into my driveway, the weight of my thoughts pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I shut off the engine but sat there for a moment, staring at the flickering porch light. It felt as though the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door, my heart racing with every step. I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump into the unknown. Once inside, I tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter and dropped my bag on the floor. I let out a long sigh, trying to release the tension coiling in my chest. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall. It was almost mocking in its normalcy. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, replaying the day's events over and over in my mind. Kevin had been so kind, so genuine during that brief moment we shared. But then I remembered the sting of humiliation from that morning, the way his laughter had echoed in the conference room, the way my colleagues had looked at me. All of it felt like a dark cloud looming over my head. What if he couldn't see beyond that? What if the truth only pushed him further away? I knew I needed to talk to him. I needed to clear the air. But how do you tell someone you care about that you once saved their life, only to be treated like a punchline? It was such a convoluted mess that I felt even more trapped. I grabbed my phone and stared at it, contemplating whether to send him a message. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to hit send. Instead, I decided to distract myself by diving into work-related tasks. I opened my laptop and started sifting through emails, but my mind drifted back to Kevin. I knew I couldn't avoid him forever, but the thought of facing him after everything was terrifying. The next day, as I walked into the hospital, I tried to muster as much confidence as I could. My heart raced as I made my way to the nurse's station, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. The moment I walked in, I noticed him across the room, chatting with a couple of doctors. The easy way he laughed made my stomach flip. I felt a mix of admiration and frustration. How could someone who had been so cruel just the day before be so charming now? The morning passed slowly as I busied myself with patient care, each hour feeling like an eternity. I could see Kevin occasionally, laughing with colleagues and attending to his rounds. I tried to focus on my patients, but my mind kept drifting back to him. I had to talk to him, to clear the air, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. Finally, during my lunch break, I spotted him sitting alone in the break room. My heart raced as I approached him. This was it. I took a deep breath and steeled myself for whatever might come next. "Hey, Kevin. Do you mind if I join you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course, I was just going over some cases," he replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. As I sat down, I felt a rush of nervous energy. "Listen, about the meeting yesterday," I began, my voice trailing off as I struggled to find the right words. Kevin's expression shifted from casual interest to concern. "Oh, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. I was just joking around. I thought we were all good friends here." There it was, the immediate dismissal of my feelings. "It wasn't just a joke for me," I finally said, the vulnerability pouring out of me. "It was hard to hear you laugh at something that was so personal." He looked taken aback, and for a moment, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively. "You know I didn't mean anything by it, right? I thought we all had a sense of humor." "Humor at my expense?" I shot back, the heat rising in my cheeks. "I didn't think it was funny." Okay, he said, raising his hands in surrender. "I hear you. I didn't mean to offend you, I really didn't. Can we just move past it?" I hesitated. Could I really just let it go? "I don't know, Kevin. It's not just about the joke. It's about how I felt. It's about how it feels to be humiliated." He looked at me, and in that moment, I could see a flicker of realization in his eyes. "I get it. I messed up. But if we're going to work together, I need you to know I respect you. I really do." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let go of the anger that had been festering inside me. "Look, I'm not perfect, and I know neither are you, but I think we both deserve a chance to move forward without this hanging over us." "Agreed," he said, his tone softening. "So how do we fix this?" I took a deep breath, feeling a bit lighter. "Maybe just be honest with each other from now on. No more jokes at my expense, okay?" "Deal," he replied, offering a tentative smile. As we continued talking, I felt the tension slowly lifting. I could see the humanity in him again, the kindness that had drawn me to him in the first place. Maybe there was hope for us after all. But as our conversation continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that I still had a bigger truth to share, one that could change everything. Would I ever find the right moment to let him know? Only time would tell. I spent the next few days in a state of cautious optimism. The air between us felt different, lighter, like the weight of unspoken words had finally been lifted. I found myself replaying our conversation in my mind, over and over. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the way he seemed genuinely committed to making things better. But deep down, I knew that our journey together was far from over. There was still so much I needed to address, and the truth I was holding on to was like a ticking clock in my chest, waiting for the right moment to explode. One evening, as the sun began to set and painted the sky in vibrant shades of orange and pink, I decided to invite him over for dinner. It felt like a small step towards healing, a chance to reconnect over something as simple yet profound as food. I cooked his favorite dish, hoping it would spark some warmth between us. As the aroma filled the kitchen, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would this be the moment? Would I finally find the courage to share my truth? When he arrived, I greeted him with a smile that felt genuine, despite the storm brewing inside me. We chatted about our days, and I made a conscious effort to keep the mood light and easy. We laughed over shared memories, and for a moment, it felt like we were back to where we started, before everything got complicated. But even as we laughed, I could feel that familiar knot in my stomach tightening. As dinner came to an end, the conversation drifted to more serious topics. He started talking about his dreams, his hopes for the future, and how he wanted to be a better version of himself. I admired his vulnerability, but the more he opened up, the more I felt the weight of my own secret pressing down on me. I wanted to contribute to this moment of honesty, but how could I do that without risking everything we had just begun to rebuild? Do you ever feel like there's something holding you back? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. It was a way to gauge his thoughts, a way to tiptoe around my truth without revealing it just yet. He paused, his expression contemplative. All the time. I think we all have our own battles, you know? Sometimes it's hard to face them, but I want to get there. I really do. His words struck a chord within me. I wanted to tell him that I understood, that I had my own battles that I had been waging for far too long. But instead I asked, what do you think it takes to overcome those battles? Honestly, it takes a lot of courage, and sometimes it takes the people around you, the ones who truly care, to help you see that you're not alone. His answer hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I felt a rush of emotion, and for a split second, I thought I might finally summon the courage to reveal my truth. But then, doubt crept in. What if he didn't react the way I hoped? What if it drove a wedge between us again? As the evening wore on, I found myself lost in thought. I wanted to be the brave person he thought I was, the person who could face her fears head-on. But the idea of exposing my vulnerabilities was terrifying. I decided to change the subject, talking about lighter things, what we wanted to do over the weekend, the latest movie releases, anything to distract from the storm of emotions inside me. But in the back of my mind, I could hear that ticking clock again. It was getting louder, more insistent. I needed to find a way to share my truth. I wanted to know if he was truly ready to accept all parts of me, the good and the bad. I couldn't keep it hidden forever. The next week felt like a blur. I found myself overthinking every interaction we had. Whenever we were together, I would steal glances at him, looking for signs that he might be ready to hear what I had to say. But then I'd retreat into my own thoughts, convinced that maybe it was better to keep my mouth shut. After all, what if my truth shattered the fragile peace we had created? One night, as we sat on my couch watching a movie, I felt a wave of determination wash over me. I turned to him, my heart pounding like a drum. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about the other day, about being honest and open with each other. He nodded, his expression encouraging. Yeah, I've been thinking about it too. I really believe we can make things work. Do you really mean that? I asked, the vulnerability in my voice surprising even me. I mean, can we really move forward without any secrets between us? He looked deep into my eyes, and for a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Absolutely. I want us to be open about everything. No more hiding. His words ignited a flicker of courage within me. What would you have done in my position? Would you have jumped in with both feet, or would you have played it safe? I took a deep breath. The time had come. Okay then. I need to tell you something important. Something I've been holding back. I could see the shift in his demeanor as he leaned forward, attentive and concerned. What is it? I hesitated for a moment, considering how to approach this life-changing revelation. But this was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I opened my mouth to speak, ready to lay my truth bare. But then, for a split second, I hesitated again, fear creeping back in. What if I wasn't ready? What if he wasn't ready? But deep down, I knew the truth had to come out. It was time to stop tiptoeing around it. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me, and I had to decide whether to finally let it go or keep it buried forever. The decision was mine to make, and as I looked into his eyes, I knew I had to take that leap of faith. I took another deep breath and finally said, I was the one who saved your life during that surgery. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick and suffocating. I watched as his face transformed, confusion etching lines across his brow. It was as if I had thrown a rock into a still pond, and the ripples were distorting everything he thought he knew. What do you mean? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I mean, I was in the operating room, and I was the one making the decisions when you were on the table. I was the one who noticed the complications. and adjusted the procedure. I was the reason you're alive right now. The silence that followed felt like a lifetime. His expression shifted from confusion to realization, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. He sat back, processing this new information, and I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Would he understand? Would he be angry? I had no idea how he would react. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly. You were there? But I know. I interrupted gently. You thought it was just the surgical team, the doctors, the nurses, but I was part of that team. I was the one who kept everything from falling apart. His eyes widened, and I could see the embarrassment wash over him. I never knew, he admitted. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I had no idea. My heart raced at his response. This was not the reaction I expected. I had braced myself for anger, for denial, but here he was, apologetic and vulnerable. It's okay, I said, trying to downplay the weight of my revelation. I understand why you didn't see me as more than just a junior staff member. I was still finding my footing, and in a high-pressure environment like that, it's easy to overlook someone who's not in the spotlight. But you saved my life, he insisted, and I could hear the sincerity in his voice. You deserve to be recognized for that. I humiliated you, and I can't take that back. I shook my head, my heart softening. You didn't know. And honestly, I've had my fair share of struggles fitting in. You weren't the first to underestimate me, and you certainly won't be the last. As I spoke, I could see the walls he had built around himself starting to crumble. So, what happens now? He asked, his voice steadier. Now, we work together, I replied. We learn from each other, and maybe, just maybe, we can make this place better for everyone. He nodded slowly, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. I want that. I want to be better. Our conversation shifted then, evolving from one of confrontation to collaboration. We began discussing our visions for the department, how we could improve communication, create an environment where every voice mattered. It felt empowering, like we were building a bridge instead of a wall. Days turned into weeks, and our partnership flourished. We faced challenges together, and I began to see a different side of him. He was no longer just the intimidating figure who had belittled me. He was a colleague, a partner in this journey. We found ourselves brainstorming late into the night, our laughter echoing through the empty halls. And with each passing day, I noticed how our dynamic shifted. He began to acknowledge my contributions in meetings, and I could see the respect growing among our colleagues. But even amidst this newfound camaraderie, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of my mind. I was grateful for the opportunity to prove myself, but I also felt a weight of expectation on my shoulders. Would he really see me as an equal, or was this just a temporary truce? One afternoon, as we were wrapping up a project, he turned to me and said, You know, I've been thinking about what you said that day, about how you were the one who saved my life. It's made me reevaluate a lot about myself and how I treat people. I felt a warmth spread through me at his words. I'm glad to hear that, I replied. It's important for all of us to recognize the value in each other, no matter the title or position. He smiled, and for a moment I could see the genuine appreciation in his eyes. You've taught me a lot, more than I ever anticipated. I want to make sure you feel valued here, always. Just as I began to feel like I had finally found my place, the unexpected happened. One day, we received an invitation to a prestigious conference in our field. It was an opportunity to showcase our work, to present our findings to the greater community. I was thrilled, but I also felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. This was my chance to shine, to show everyone that I was more than just a junior staff member. But it also meant stepping into the spotlight, where I had previously felt so humiliated. As we prepared our presentation, I felt the familiar mix of excitement and fear bubbling within me. I wanted to impress not only our colleagues, but also myself. I wanted to prove that I belonged there, that my voice mattered just as much as anyone else's. The day of the conference arrived, and my nerves were at an all-time high. As I stood backstage, I could hear the chatter of the audience and the rustle of papers. I watched as the previous speakers captivated the crowd with their expertise and charisma. My heart raced. Was I ready for this? But then I remembered how far I had come, the battles I had fought to get here. I took a deep breath and told myself I could do this. As we stepped onto the stage, I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. This was my opportunity to show everyone, my colleagues, the world, that I was capable of great things. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened next, I was ready to embrace it. As we stood in front of that audience, the bright lights blinding us momentarily, I felt a rush of adrenaline. My team and I exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between us. We had worked hard for this moment, and I could see the determination in their eyes. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the fact that I wasn't just there to speak. I was there to share our passion, our research, and our vision for the future. I stepped forward to take the lead, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, we are excited to share our findings on innovative patient care strategies that can significantly improve recovery outcomes. My heart raced as I scanned the audience, searching for familiar faces, but my gaze landed on one I had hoped to avoid, Dr. Carter. I could see him leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, a skeptical expression on his face. As I continued, sharing statistics and stories that highlighted the importance of our work, I could feel the energy shift in the room. There were nods of understanding, murmurs of agreement, and slowly but surely, I began to feel more confident. I was no longer just the girl who had been humiliated. I was a professional, standing up for something I believed in deeply. My team members took their turns presenting, each adding layers to our project. As we wrapped up, I looked out at the audience, my heart swelling with pride. We're not just researchers. We're advocates for our patients. Our goal is to empower them, to give them a voice in their own care. The applause erupted, and I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of belonging I had longed for. After the presentation, we were flooded with questions and compliments. It felt surreal. The very people who had once doubted me were now engaging with my ideas, and I felt myself glowing with the affirmation. Even Dr. Carter, who had looked skeptical throughout, approached us with a thoughtful expression. "You made some compelling points, especially about patient involvement," he said, nodding slowly. I was taken aback. Was this the same man who had belittled me only months ago? As the conference continued over the next few days, I found myself more relaxed, more integrated into the community. I engaged in discussions, networking with other professionals, and sharing ideas. It felt like a world I had once been afraid to enter, and yet here I was, contributing to it. But the real turning point came during a breakout session when I found myself in a small group discussion with other emerging leaders in the field. We shared our experiences, our challenges, and how we had overcome them. I listened intently as they spoke about their own moments of humiliation, the times they had felt belittled or overlooked. It was a revelation to realize that I wasn't alone. Everyone had faced their own battles. One woman, a nurse named Sarah, shared a story about a time she had been chastised in front of her peers by a senior doctor. "It stung, but it pushed me to rise above it. I went on to lead a team that implemented a new patient care protocol that changed the way we operated," she said, her eyes shining with pride. Hearing her story inspired me. I thought back to my own experience with Dr. Carter and how I had allowed that moment to define me for so long. But now, I realized that I had the power to redefine my story. I could choose to be more than the girl who was humiliated. I was a survivor, a fighter. As the days passed, I found myself growing closer to my teammates. We celebrated our success, sharing laughs and stories late into the night. We were not just colleagues. We were friends bonded by our shared passion and experiences. I felt a sense of camaraderie that I had missed for so long, a feeling of being part of something bigger than myself. But as the conference drew to a close, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still an unresolved tension hanging over me. I knew I needed to confront Dr. Carter, to understand why he had acted the way he did. It was a conversation I had avoided for months, but I realized that clarity was essential for my growth. The last day of the conference arrived, and I found him alone in a quiet corner of the hall. My heart raced as I approached him, but I reminded myself of all I had accomplished. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "Dr. Carter, do you have a moment?" He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Of course. What's on your mind? I hesitated, searching for the right words. I wanted to talk about what happened a few months ago. The way you addressed me in front of the team, it really affected me. I've worked hard to overcome that moment, and I'd like to understand why it happened. He sighed, his expression turning serious. I see. I was under a lot of pressure at that time. I didn't handle it well, and I apologize. You have a lot of potential, and I should have supported you instead of belittling you. His words caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness or dismissal, but here he was, acknowledging my feelings. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. We spoke for a while longer, and by the end of our conversation, I felt a sense of closure. I had faced the source of my humiliation, and, in doing so, reclaimed my narrative. As I walked away, I felt lighter, ready to embrace the future I had fought so hard to create. As I stepped out of Dr. Carter's office, the cool air of the hallway wrapped around me like a gentle hug. I glanced around at the familiar faces of my colleagues, and instead of feeling the weight of judgment, I felt a spark of something new, freedom. I had taken a significant step in my journey, one that felt like peeling off a layer of shame I didn't even realize I had been wearing for months. It was strange how one conversation could shift my entire perspective. I wasn't just a victim of that moment anymore. I was a survivor who had stood up for herself. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and reflections. I dove deeper into my work, finding solace in the rhythm of my daily routine. Patients came and went, each one with their own story, their own struggles. I found a renewed passion for the role I played in their lives. I remembered why I chose this path in the first place. Every time I walked into a patient's room, I reminded myself of the power I had to make a difference. The experiences I had gone through, including the humiliation from Dr. Carter, were shaping me into a more empathetic caregiver. One afternoon, while I was reviewing charts at my desk, I overheard a couple of nurses chatting about an upcoming seminar on patient safety. It was one of those topics that always sparked my interest. I leaned in, catching snippets of their conversation. They mentioned that Dr. Carter was going to be one of the speakers. My heart sank for a moment, but I quickly shook off the anxiety. I realized this was another opportunity, not just to learn, but to redefine my relationship with him. When the day of the seminar arrived, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The auditorium buzzed with energy, filled with staff eager to hear insights on improving patient care. As I took my seat, I couldn't help but notice Dr. Carter at the front, confidently adjusting the microphone. He looked composed, perhaps even charismatic. I reminded myself of our earlier conversation and how he had apologized. I was here to learn, not to dwell on the past. As he began speaking, I listened attentively. His insights on patient safety were undeniably valuable. He discussed protocols, shared statistics, and even recounted some personal stories that illustrated his points. The audience was engaged, laughing at appropriate moments, nodding in agreement. But as he spoke, I noticed something else. He had a way of relating to us that I hadn't experienced before. It was as if he had transformed overnight from the intimidating figure I once feared to a mentor, someone who genuinely cared about our growth. During a Q&A session, I felt a surge of courage. My hand shot up, and to my surprise, I was called on. Dr. Carter, thank you for your talk. As someone who has been deeply affected by patient safety issues, can you elaborate on how we can foster a culture of support among the staff, especially when mistakes happen? I watched as his eyes widened, a hint of surprise crossing his face, and then a smile broke through. That's an excellent question. It's essential for us to create an environment where everyone feels safe to speak up, to share their concerns without fear of ridicule. We all make mistakes, but it's how we learn and grow from those mistakes that defines us as professionals. His response resonated with the audience, and I felt a swell of pride. I wasn't just participating. I was part of a larger conversation about change. After the seminar, I approached him again, this time feeling more confident. Thank you for addressing my question. It really means a lot to hear you speak about creating a supportive environment. He nodded, his expression sincere. I appreciate your input. We need voices like yours in this discussion. It's how we improve. I walked away feeling lighter once again. As I transitioned into the following months, I continued to focus on my work and my relationships with my colleagues. The camaraderie grew stronger, and so did my confidence. I was no longer the girl who cowered in the corner. I was a woman taking charge of her narrative, and I was determined to inspire others to do the same. Then came the day that would change everything. I was in the middle of a shift when I received a call from the emergency department. A patient had come in after a severe accident, and they needed the surgical team on standby. My heart raced. This was a life-and-death situation. We all gathered in the operating room, and as I scrubbed in, I focused on the task at hand. The team worked seamlessly, each member playing their role to perfection. But then, in the midst of the chaos, something went wrong. The patient's condition deteriorated rapidly, and we needed to act fast. I remember feeling the adrenaline surging through me, pushing away any fear I had left. Together, we navigated the crisis. I took the lead in a particular section of the procedure, guiding our team with a clarity that surprised even myself. I could see Dr. Carter across the room, and for the first time, I felt an unexpected bond forming between us. After what felt like hours, but was likely just a blur of minutes, we stabilized the patient. I could hardly believe it. We had done it. As we wrapped up, the gravity of the situation began to sink in. We had saved a life that day. Later, as I stepped out of the operating room, I found Dr. Carter waiting for me. His expression was a mix of gratitude and relief. "You were incredible in there. I don't think we could have done it without you." I felt the warmth spread through me. "Thank you, but it was a team effort. We all played a part." He looked at me, sincerity shining in his eyes. "You've come so far since that day, and I admire your strength. You're a vital part of this team, and I want you to know that." As I walked away, the weight of my past began to dissolve even further. This moment, this recognition, felt like the culmination of everything I had fought for. I was no longer just defined by one humiliating incident. I was a key player in a life-saving operation. I had reclaimed my power, not just in the eyes of my colleagues, but within myself. It was a beautiful reminder that sometimes, the darkest moments can lead to the brightest transformations. I took a deep breath, stepping into the bustling hallway filled with the sounds of nurses bustling about, doctors discussing cases, and the occasional beep of machines echoing in the background. My heart felt lighter. I had spent so many months battling my insecurities and the shadow of that humiliating moment. And now, here I was, feeling like I finally belonged. As I walked past the nurses' station, I caught snippets of conversation, laughter, and the everyday camaraderie that filled the air. It felt good to be part of something bigger, to feel valued. But the euphoria didn't last long. The moment I stepped into the break room, the atmosphere shifted. There were whispers, and I could sense the tension. I knew they were talking about me, about us. I had heard the rumors about the surgery and how it had changed everything. I took a seat, trying to blend into the background, but I could feel their eyes on me. It was as if they were trying to reconcile the woman they had seen, humiliated a few months ago, with the one who had just played a crucial role in saving a life. "Did you see how she handled herself in there?" I overheard a nurse say to another. "I mean, it's like she's a completely different person." I didn't know whether to feel flattered or anxious. The truth was, I didn't quite recognize myself either. I had transformed, but the scars of humiliation were still fresh. I could still hear Dr. Carter's words echoing in my mind, and I thought back to the moment I had found my footing in that operating room, how everything had clicked into place. Yet, as I sat there sipping my coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being judged, still navigating that tightrope between acceptance and rejection. I looked over at a group of my colleagues who had once turned away from me, and I felt a knot in my stomach. I wanted to confront them, to ask them why they had treated me that way, but the words felt stuck in my throat. Instead, I took another sip of my coffee and tried to focus on the task at hand. Days turned into weeks, and gradually, things began to change. I found myself getting involved in more procedures and team meetings. Dr. Carter started to assign me more responsibilities, and with each new challenge, I began to shed the weight of my past. I forged new friendships, and slowly, the whispers turned into supportive conversations. I was no longer just the girl who had been humiliated. I was becoming a respected member of the surgical team. But then, just as I was starting to feel comfortable, The universe threw me another curveball. It was a Thursday afternoon when I received a call to come into the hospital for an emergency meeting. When I arrived, I found Dr. Carter and a few senior doctors gathered in the conference room, their faces serious. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. What could this be about? "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Dr. Carter began. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention." He paused, scanning the room before locking eyes with me. "A patient we operated on last week has developed complications. We need to discuss the next steps." As they went over the case, I felt a chill run down my spine. I remembered the patient. Their struggle had mirrored my own in some ways. They were someone fighting against the odds, and now it felt like we were all fighting again, this time for their life. Dr. Carter looked at me, his expression serious. "I want you to take the lead on this. You've shown incredible resilience, and I believe you can handle this." I nodded, my heart racing. This was my chance to prove myself further, to show that I wasn't just defined by my past. But the weight of responsibility pressed down on me. What if I failed? What if I made things worse? As we delved into the case, I felt the familiar sense of purpose ignite within me. I remembered all the hard work and determination that had led me here. I was no longer that girl who had been humiliated. I was a woman who had fought for her place and had earned the respect of her peers. We worked tirelessly, analyzing every detail, discussing potential risks, and weighing our options. With each passing hour, I could feel the tension growing, not just in the room, but inside me as well. I could sense the stakes rising, and it felt like the pressure was building to a boiling point. When the time came for the surgery, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. As I scrubbed in, I glanced at the mirror and saw a woman staring back at me, who was ready to fight for this patient's life. The buzzing of the operating room felt like home, and I was ready to do everything I could to save them. As the surgery progressed, I felt every ounce of my training come to the forefront. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I was focused, determined, and in control. The team moved like a well-oiled machine, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of clarity. We weren't just saving a life. We were proving to ourselves that we could rise above the challenges, that we could come together as a team. When the procedure came to an end, I was exhausted, but fulfilled. I looked around at my colleagues, and I could see the pride mirrored in their eyes. We had done it again. We had fought together and emerged victorious. As I stepped out of the operating room, a sense of accomplishment washed over me. I had faced my fears, embraced my past, and transformed it into something powerful. This was no longer just about overcoming humiliation. It was about embracing the journey, and I was ready for whatever came next. Stepping into the quiet hallway, I felt the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, but now it was mixed with an overwhelming sense of relief. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above me, and I took a moment to gather myself, leaning against the cool wall. My mind was racing, reflecting on the events that had unfolded over the past few weeks. The humiliation I had faced at the hands of my boss felt like a distant memory, eclipsed by the triumph of that surgery. I had gone from feeling small and insignificant to being an integral part of something monumental. But as I walked towards the break room, ready to celebrate with my colleagues, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending confrontation. I knew that my boss, the very man who had belittled me in front of the entire staff, would likely be waiting for me. I had saved his life, and yet, he remained blissfully unaware of the irony in that. Would he acknowledge my role in this? Would he even care? When I entered the break room, the atmosphere was electric. Laughter and chatter filled the air as my colleagues shared stories from the surgery, each of us riding the high of our success. I slipped into a conversation, but my heart was racing at the thought of facing my boss. Just as I was starting to relax, the door swung open, and he walked in, his presence instantly silencing the room. I watched as he surveyed the crowd, his expression unreadable. Would he brush past me, or would he confront me head-on? As he approached, I held my breath, my palms growing clammy. "Great job in there," he finally said, his tone unexpectedly neutral. "You really stepped up." I was taken aback. Had he really just acknowledged my contribution? A part of me wanted to bask in the praise, but another part felt the need to remind him of the moments that had led us here. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Thank you," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But it wasn't just about the surgery. It's been a long road to get here." His brow furrowed slightly, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, the memories of his earlier humiliation flooding back. "You may not remember, but you called me out in front of everyone just a few weeks ago. It hurt, and it almost made me doubt myself." For a moment, the room was silent, and I could feel the weight of the past hanging between us. I was aware of the eyes on us, my colleagues leaning in, eager to see how this would unfold. He opened his mouth to respond, but then closed it again, as if weighing his words carefully. "I was wrong," he finally admitted, his voice low. "I let my frustration get the best of me. I didn't realize how much pressure you were under." There it was, the acknowledgement I had yearned for. My heart raced, a mix of vindication and empathy swirling within me. "We're all under pressure," I said, my voice softening. "But it's how we support each other that makes the difference." He nodded, and I could see the gears shifting in his mind. "I want to do better. I want to support you and the team." His words resonated with me. I had spent so much time wishing for an apology, but what I truly wanted was growth, for both of us. "Let's work together to create that support," I suggested. "We all have something valuable to offer, and it's time we recognized each other's strengths." He smiled, a genuine expression that surprised me. "I'd like that. I really would." Just as we started to bridge the gap, a colleague clapped loudly, breaking the tension. "All right, let's raise a glass to our amazing team and their incredible surgeon." Laughter erupted, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We all gathered around the makeshift table, toasting to our success. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of camaraderie that I had longed for. The evening wore on, and as I shared stories and laughed with my colleagues, I glanced at my boss, who was mingling with the team, genuinely connecting with others. It was a significant shift, and it filled me with hope. Perhaps this experience could reshape our dynamics moving forward. As the night drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. I had fought against humiliation, battled my own insecurities, and emerged stronger, not just as a surgeon, but as a person. I had learned the importance of resilience, the value of acknowledging our struggles, and the power of forgiveness. Walking out of the hospital that night, I felt lighter. There was still a long way to go in my career and personal growth, but the steps I had taken were monumental. I had faced my demons, found my voice, and reclaimed my narrative. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow over the parking lot as I climbed into my car. I turned the key in the ignition, and as the engine roared to life, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue to rise, to push through challenges, and to lift others as I climbed. The journey was far from over, but I was ready for whatever lay ahead. As I drove home that night, the soft hum of the engine felt like a comforting embrace. The streets were quiet, illuminated only by the occasional streetlight flickering in the darkness. I navigated the familiar route, but everything felt different now. Each turn, each landmark, held a new meaning, a testament to the transformation I had undergone. I couldn't help but think of the long nights spent in the OR, the moments of doubt that had plagued me, and how far I had come since those early days as a surgical resident. I thought about the team, how we had started to forge real connections, and how our shared experiences had begun to weave a fabric of support that I had never imagined possible. It amazed me to think that just weeks ago, I had been isolated in my own fears, feeling like an imposter in a white coat. Now, I was part of something larger, a community that valued authenticity over perfection. It dawned on me that this journey wasn't just about becoming a better surgeon, it was also about becoming a better human being. Arriving home, I parked my car and took a moment to breathe in the crisp night air. Under the vast expanse of the starry sky, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I realized that the journey I had taken was not only about overcoming obstacles, but also about embracing vulnerability. I had learned that our struggles don't define us. Rather, how we rise from them does. Each setback had been a lesson, each moment of doubt, a stepping stone towards self-discovery. As I stepped inside my house, the familiar scent of lavender from my diffuser enveloped me. I poured myself a cup of herbal tea, letting the warmth seep into my hands. I settled on the couch, reflecting on how the challenges I had faced were universal. We all grapple with our insecurities, our fears, and our desires for acceptance. It made me wonder, how do we learn to navigate this complex web of emotions? I decided to journal that night, something I hadn't done in a while. Writing had always been my outlet, a way to process my thoughts and feelings. As I put pen to paper, I chronicled the pivotal moments of my journey, the humiliation, the doubts, the breakthroughs. I wrote about the supportive colleagues who had become friends and how their encouragement had helped illuminate my path. Each word felt like a piece of armor, fortifying me against the uncertainties that still lay ahead. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, I felt the weight of my past begin to lift. I found solace in sharing my story, not just with my colleagues, but also with aspiring surgeons who reached out to me, seeking guidance. I realized that by speaking openly about my struggles, I was not only helping others, but also solidifying my own healing process. It was a beautiful cycle of giving and receiving, and it made me appreciate the interconnectedness of our experiences. Then came the day of the team's first collaborative surgery. It was a daunting procedure, but the atmosphere in the operating room was electric with excitement and camaraderie. As we scrubbed in, I looked around and saw the faces of my teammates, each one radiating confidence and determination. We had all come together, united by a common goal and a newfound trust in one another. During the surgery, I felt a sense of flow that I hadn't experienced before. Every movement, every decision felt synchronized with my team. We communicated seamlessly, our hands moving in harmony, each of us contributing our unique strengths. It was exhilarating, and as we closed the patient up, I felt a rush of gratitude. This was teamwork at its finest, a culmination of our shared growth and resilience. After the surgery, as we gathered for a debrief, I could see the pride on everyone's faces. We celebrated not just the successful outcome, but also the journey that had brought us together. In that moment, I realized that my initial fears of inadequacy had transformed into a powerful sense of belonging. I wasn't just a surgeon. I was part of a family, a network of individuals who supported each other. It was a revelation that changed everything for me. I understood that the scars I carried were not to be hidden, but shared. I began to speak openly about my experiences, not just in casual conversations, but also in more formal settings. I joined mentorship programs aimed at helping young women in medicine navigate their own struggles. I encouraged them to embrace their vulnerabilities, to be proud of their journeys, and to know that it was okay to not have it all figured out. Now, looking back on everything I had been through, I felt a sense of closure. The conflicts I had faced, internally and externally, had shaped me, but they didn't define me. I learned that resilience is not just about bouncing back. It's about growing, learning, and lifting others as we rise. So I ask you, what struggles have shaped your journey? How have you turned your challenges into strengths? I'd love to hear your stories, so please share your experiences in the comments below. As I closed my journal that night, I felt a sense of completion wash over me. I had come full circle, and although the journey ahead was still unwritten, I felt equipped to face it. I was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing now that I could face them with strength, vulnerability, and an unwavering belief in myself and my team. The story continues, and I am excited to see where it leads.